Hey, what's up, guys? Brian Keene here with you. Thanks for joining us. I think I started this a couple minutes early, so while we wait for people to ramble in, I'm going to pour myself a drink tonight. I am drinking Blanton's. It's a bourbon out of Kentucky. I was introduced to this by Deb Kuhn. Those of you who have been around a long time might remember Deb. She used to be one of the moderators on the old Brian Keene forum. And she gifted me with a bottle of this, many, many years ago, back when you couldn't get it here in Pennsylvania. And it's fantastic stuff. And of course, now you can get it here in Pennsylvania, so it's all good. So yeah, while folks are coming in, howdy. We like to show off things every week, right? So tonight, let's go full pulp. And I'm going to show off these because they're going to tie into not one, but two things we're going to talk about a little later in the stream. Let's go with Guy N. Smith's Crab series. First I'm going to show up this is a reprint. This is a signed edition. Came out, when was this? Back in 2009. This was a reprint. Of course, the original came out back in 76, I believe. It's got a cover blurb by me right there. I don't know if y'all can read that or not. And it has an introduction, of course, by my dear friend, the late, great, departed J.F. Gonzalez, in which he talks about how this, of course, inspired the Clicker series. There were a bunch of books in the Crab series. Now, these are all original English paperbacks. You had Killer Crabs, and you had The Origin of the Crabs, and you had Crabs on the Rampage, and Crab Moon, and of course, Crabs, the Human Sacrifice. So much fun. I've seen people compare these online to like the work of William W. Johnstone, and I think that's unfair because unlike Johnstone, Guy N. Smith could actually fucking write. And he was going for fun with these books, and that's what they are. They're fun. They're a joy for me personally. They're gems in me and Mary's collection. I haven't reread them in years. I probably should this year. In fact, I may do that. I'm currently rereading Lord of the Rings, but I may break those out when I'm done Lord of the Rings and reread them again. So let's get to your questions. The first question says, it's from Chris Morris. This is posted on Patreon. Chris asks, do you have any tips on finding works by older authors that are not generally available? I'm talking about works like the Crab series by Guy N. Smith, for instance. Ta-da! I'd like to read some of these foundational works, but the prices to find a copy are prohibitive. Yep, they are, Chris. You can blame my pal Grady Hendrix for that. Grady ITs, I love you. But yeah, it used to be, a decade ago, you could buy these for cheap. I mean, you could go to a used bookstore and pick them up for $1. You could get them on eBay and in big bundles. But two things have happened. One, you've had Grady's Paperbacks from Hell, but it's not just Paperbacks from Hell. Paperbacks from Hell made these things desirable to a mainstream audience and perhaps to later stage millennials and Generation Z. But you had folks like Jesus and myself and others proselytizing books like this to earlier stage millennials. So that's created a demand for these books. The other thing that has created a demand is the horror tie-ins, the media tie-ins, like the Halloween books and the Omen books and all of those, the novelizations. Nobody does novelizations anymore. It's a lost art. There are still media tie-ins. Mary, of course, has an Alien media tie-in novel coming out next February. It's really good. I've read it. I'm not just saying that because I'm her boyfriend. I'm saying that as a fan of Alien. It has all the fear factor of the first Alien movie with all the the fighting and violence of the second Alien movie. So, and the social commentary of the third one. So if any of those were your favorite Alien movie, you're probably going to dig her novel. But novelizations, they aren't done anymore. And I know a lot of guys a little younger than me, not so much younger, but like Christopher Triana, Matt Serafini, Adam Cesare, who you might call Adam Caesar, Scott Cole, Wesley Southard. These guys, it's nothing for them to spend $50 on a beat up paperback novelization of, Halloween 4. So yeah, it is getting harder to find these. However, I would look on eBay. I've been putting up Dave Thomas's library piece by piece on eBay, and I'm surprised by how low some of the books go for. I'm talking signed paperbacks by Charles L. Grant, by Bentley Little, by Robert R. McCammon that go for $5, $10, $20. And when I look to see if maybe I'm not pricing things well, I see similar things. I've seen some of these Crabs paperbacks, some of these editions, go for $5 or $10 on eBay. The other thing is small town used bookstores where the owners aren't really on the internet. I mean, everybody's on the internet, but they're not monitoring these prices, and they're just, they're selling them for $1 each or whatever the used bookstore. You can still find good deals at used bookstores, usually not in the city. In the city, they're a little more aware, but some of these small towns, you can find them. Yard sales, estate sales. And, a lot of this stuff is being reprinted. Oh, Christ, I'm blanking on their name. The Blantons is kicking in already. Hang on. I'm going to Google it live while I'm talking to you guys. Our publisher, Richmond, Virginia. Valancourt Books. There we go. And Valancourt, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know why I blanked on the name. Valancourt Books, VALAN Court Books. They're publishing and reprinting a lot of this stuff that's been out of print, including a lot of the stuff featured in Paperbacks from Hell. They are great people. The books are obviously they love what they're doing, and the books are treated with such care and such graciousness. And if you can't find the originals, definitely check out some of their reprints. And there are other publishers that are doing the same. I don't think anybody's doing it to the extent Valancourt is. Centipede Press reprints a lot of great old stuff, but Centipede Press is probably also the premier publisher of collectible limited editions. So you're going to pay a pretty penny for those, often more than the original would cost you. It's worth every penny if that's your bag, if that's your thing. But yeah, those are some sources. Definitely check out Valancourt Books website and their catalog, though. And I hope that helps, Chris. Efren asks, so what are the initial plans for McFurface Publishing Limited? Paperbacks, ebooks, other authors. Efren, of course, is referring to my own publishing company, which is not McFurface Publishing Limited. It is, in fact, Manhattan on Mars Press. Of course, you patron supporters knew about it before the general public, and now the general public knows about it as of last Sunday's newsletter. It caused quite a stir in our industry. Initial plans are exactly what I said. Paperbacks and ebooks, and possibly trade hardcovers. I will not be getting into signed limited editions. That's not what I want to get into doing. That's a whole different skill set, a whole different investment. So my signed limited editions will continue to come out through Cemetery Dance and through Thunderstorm Books, and I have one coming up with Bad Moon Books. That's where those are going to stay. It will not include audiobooks. Again, I'm not set up to do audiobooks. those will continue to stay with my audiobook publishers. It's not going to include comic books because, again, whole different thing. But it will include, going forward, all of my paperbacks, all of my ebooks. Eventually, it is going to be a very slow process, and I cannot stress that enough. Why? Because I'm one guy. And more importantly, I'm doing that out of respect for the publishers that I'm currently with. I fully realize if I were to tomorrow morning wake up, email every one of my publishers and say, I want all my rights back right now, take everything out of print, it would crash the market. It would. And, I don't want to do that. The health of my publishers and the health of our genre and our industry is something that has mattered to me for the last 25 years. Anybody that questions that at this point, you haven't been paying attention. But also, I want to give my publishers time. Deadite Press, for example. I'll use Rose, for example. I adore Rose. I've known Rose for 25 years. She has always treated me fairly. She pays me on time. She pays me well. Rose has some ideas what she wants to do with Deadite in the future. The pandemic, it didn't shutter Deadite, but it really slowed things down there. And she's got plans to rebuild. And the last thing I want to do is be a fly in that ointment and fuck everything up by pulling all my rights back immediately. So, in the case of Deadite Press and everybody else, it's going to be a very slow process. We're talking years. We're not talking months. Don't think that by the end of 2023, everything will be re-released via Manhattan on Mars Press. That's not how it's going to happen. But anything new going forward will indeed come out through Manhattan on Mars in paperback and ebook. And slowly, everything that is currently in print will start coming out through Manhattan on Mars. The first reprint, it's looking like it will be one of three books. I'm not sure which one. It will either be a new edition of Clickers Forever, which, you know what? I'll give you an exclusive. There's going to be new content in the new edition of Clickers Forever. Am I trying to get you to buy another copy? Well, yeah, I am, because, all the money from Clickers Forever goes, of course, to JF Gonzalez's wife and daughter, and I like to see them get money. So we're going to include some new content. Just talked with author Peter Atkins today, who many of you probably know from Hellraiser and other things. Pete was dear friends with Jesus when he lived in Los Angeles, and Pete's going to write a nice nonfiction piece for the book. So there'll be some new content. So it's going to be Clickers Forever or Leader of the Band, The Best of Hail Satan Volume 4, or Sundancing. I'm still debating on Sundancing because, I said that it would never see a paperback or ebook release. But I put it up on Patreon and nobody seemed to mind. And I said I would like to do an audiobook of it at some point, and nobody seemed to mind. So, I'm kind of gauging what people would say if I said, hey, everybody cool if I do a paperback and ebook. So it'll be one of those three will be the first reprint out the door. The first new book out the door will most likely be Submerged, the Labyrinth book 2. As far as other authors, no plans for that. Jesus, I could do his books through it, but they're already set up through his own imprint, Midnight Library. I've always thought that I would make an outstanding literary agent. I would make a terrible publisher. I don't want to be responsible for other people's money. And so no, I don't foresee a situation where I would ever publish other authors. I can foresee a situation where I may tell other authors, here's how you do it. But I don't know that I would actually publish them. So hopefully that answers your question, Efren. Next up, we go to Mr. Macabre, totally switching gears. In Suburban Gothic, the spider creature. Was it a Brian Smith freak or a Brian Keene mutant? I wasn't sure because I thought at first it was one of the remaining infants from beneath the house at the beginning, but by the end I wasn't sure due to its mating ritual. Sorry for any potential spoilers, everyone. I don't think there's spoilers involved here, brother. I think you're safe. Answering it without spoilers. There's a scene in Suburban Gothic that involves a spider mutant, and he wants to know, was it a Brian Smith freak from Freak Show or a Brian Keene mutant from Urban Gothic? Well, it was both. We don't explain it in the book. We probably should have, but we were already running long on that book, and we wanted to get it out. Brian wrote the initial scene with that creature, so it was definitely a freak. I'm going to pause because there's a truck going by out there, and I got the windows open. Oh, those were some National Guard trucks. But don't worry, we're not at war. There's an armory right down the road, right down the river. So Brian originally wrote that scene. And it was very clear it was one of the freaks from Freak Show. But, you talk about the nursery, the baby nursery in Urban Gothic, and then, we mention them again at the start of Suburban Gothic in the prologue. Since Suburban Gothic takes place years later, some of those mutants from the nursery in the original book were old enough, that they would have probably interbreeded with the freaks in the mall. So I saw Spider-Girl as a combination of both. One of Brian's freaks and one of my mutants got together, hooked up in whatever was left of the Hot Topic, and the results were Spider-Girl. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Jim Cobb says, are there any books you feel should be required reading for all aspiring writers, regardless of genre or niche? Yes, absolutely. And I even made the list. I wrote it down here. I'm going to start with Ink Stained by John Urbancic, not Ink Stains. He also has a series of books called Ink Stains. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about a singular book called Ink Stained. John's one of my best friends, full disclosure. That being said, this is my favorite book on writing and creating and art that I've ever read. I encouraged him to compile it and put it together, and I'm very happy he did. If you are any kind of writer or artist or filmmaker or photographer, or if you're doing anything creative, this book should be on your nightstand. It is required reading. So Ink Stained by John Urbancic. Also, if you are a working writer, Starve Better by Nick Mamatas. It's no bullshit. It's straight up advice on how to make a living as a writer, regardless of where you're at, regardless of genre, regardless of niche, regardless of whether you're just starting out, whether you're an all-time pro. So Starve Better by Nick Mamatas. Welcome to Hell by Tom Piccirilli. It's a slim volume. It's an older volume. Some of the information in there is out of date. For example, at the end, there's an appendix that talks about message boards and webzines where you can submit and get writing advice. And a lot of those don't exist anymore. Of course, Pic's not with us anymore to update the book, but there's still a lot of really good advice from one of the greatest authors of our generation. The Writing Life by Jeff Strand. Again, very practical, very no nonsense, although it's full of nonsense. It's a very funny book, which you would expect from Strand, but it's also very serious. And finally, The Successful Novelist by David Morrell. This is a nonfiction book that I used to actually, hold on, there's more National Guard rolling by. I used to teach college at York College of Pennsylvania back during the 2007 through 2009 economic crisis. I had to supplement my income with a teaching job. And The Successful Novelist by David Morrell was a book that I required them to read. A lot of the authors that took my class, y'all would know many of them. Christian Jensen was probably the best student I ever had, believe it or not. I told him, you should buy this book and read it. Consider it part of the class. It's one that I highly recommend. And David has gone back and updated it over the years. It used to have a different title, Lessons from a Lifetime of Writing. Try to get the edition that's called The Successful Novelist if you can. So those are ones that, regardless of genre, I would recommend. However, if you are specifically a horror writer, there are two more. And these aren't, okay, maybe we are at war. I don't know. I don't know if you guys can hear them or not rolling by, but there's all kinds of stuff rolling by tonight. And they're all from the armory. Two more. I missed Biden's speech. What happened? Are we under martial law? Two more if you're specifically writing horror. Southern Fried and Horrified by Ronald Kelly, and A Writer's Tale by Richard Lehman. Now, these are two very similar, very spiritual books in that they are autobiographies, but they are also books about writing advice. I'm sorry. I'm actually now literally wondering what's going on. That's like the 7th National Guard truck that's rolled by, and they're all, you can't see them obviously, but they're like decked out with equipment, and I don't know, maybe they got maneuvers this weekend. Southern Fried and Horrified by Ronald Kelly, and A Writer's Tale by Richard Lehman. They're both autobiographies, but they're also both about writing, particularly about writing horror. A Writer's Tale is near and dear to my heart. I've got my copy, and all my correspondence and cards and Christmas cards and postcards and things I got from Dick Lehman over the years, they're all wedged in it. When you read A Writer's Tale, regardless of your thoughts on Richard Lehman, I know people are very divided. People either love his writing or they hate his writing. Even the people who hate his writing, who knew Dick Lehman, will tell you he was a gem. He was one of the gentlest, kindest, most supportive authors our industry has ever known. Guys like myself and Jesus and Tom Piccirilli and Ryan Harding and Gina Mitchell and Hittabel Wilson, everybody that's helped everybody, Mary San Giovanni, we patterned ourselves after Dick Lehman because he did it for all of us. And when you read this book and you see exactly the struggles he went through and the bullshit he had to put up with in this industry, you can't help but be moved by it. And the same goes for Southern Fried and Horrified by Ron Kelly. You know, I thought I knew everything that Ron had gone through with the collapse of Zebra and you know, when he quit writing there for a good decade, but I didn't know the half of it. They're really eye-opening works. So I encourage you to pick those up. Southern Fried and Horrified is available everywhere. It's out in paperback. I believe it's out in ebook. A Writer's Tale is not. Getting back to Chris's first question of tonight, you are going to pay a pretty penny for A Writer's Tale if you can find one on eBay. They regularly go for $200, $300, up to $600. At least the last time I checked. Maybe the prices come down. I don't know. Years ago, the family had said that there might be a new edition forthcoming. It hasn't happened yet. And people ask me, I don't know. I don't know what the status is on that. But it's a great book. If you have the means, if you can afford it and you find a copy, yes, you should buy it, particularly if you're a Lehman fan, but also if you're a writer of horror. More book recommendations. Sean asks, what were your top 5 books of 2021? Sean, I owe you another answer because this is a question that I quit answering. I used to every year do the top 10 books of the year, top 10 books that I read. And I gave it a lot of thought, and invariably I would get raked across the coals, publicly or privately. Why didn't you include my book? your list is bullshit because you know all these people. Yeah, well, guess what? I've been doing this 25 years. I fucking know everybody. Okay, I know the big names. I know the people starting out. I know everybody. So if you want me to make a list that not you, Sean, I'm talking to these people. You want me to make a list of people I don't know? It's not going to be a list of the top 10 horror novels I read for the year. So I quit answering this question for that reason, and also because my opinion carries weight, and it probably carries more weight than it should, but there's nothing I can do about that. If I left somebody off the list, if a new author sent me their book and I read it and I enjoyed it, but it didn't make my top 5 or my top 10, and I left it off the list, people could be crushed by that. And I'm not saying people were sometimes. People were hurt, and I don't want to go around kicking people. I'm trying to inspire people, not kick them unless they deserve it, like that douchebag on Twitter today. We'll get to that later. So I'm really hesitant to answer this one, Sean. And the other problem is I read so many books last year, I can't remember the top 5. And that's not the bourbon. That's just, I really can't. I'm almost 55. I'll be 55 this month. And my memory's not what it used to be. So I owe you another question, Sean. I hope you understand, and I hope you forgive me. Ask me something else, and next week, I promise you. You know what? Sean gets to ask 2 questions next week. So, Sean, you get 2 questions next week and 2 answers. Jay Wilburn, the great Jay Wilburn, says, I recently saw a trans reader on Twitter asking you about your approach to writing LGBT characters and trans characters in particular. Could you elaborate on your approach to getting characters like that right? Yes. Great question, Jay. The conversation on Twitter was in regards to the character Rose from the Complex. Now, Rose isn't the only trans character that I've written. Thor, Metal Gods had a trans character. Island of the Dead currently has a trans character. In the case of Thor, I wasn't worried so much about flubbing it because we had 2 wonderful trans writers on the writing staff in the writer's room. So I knew if I fucked something up, they'd call me on it, and rightfully so. In the case of the Complex, Rose was my favorite character. She was the one I rooted for the most. And she wasn't really based on any one person. A lot of the characters in the Complex were inspired by people I knew in life. We've talked about the old cat lady. She's 100% based on Mary Sangiovanni's mother. The Vietnam vet was based on a friend of my father's, gentleman of color who came back from Nam with my dad, and they still had a year in their enlistment, and they got put on riot duty in DC and in Detroit and elsewhere, Chicago, and everything that character goes through in the book and his flashback, getting called an Uncle Tom and all that, my father's friend went through. I heard his story when I was about 17 or 18. No, I must have been older than that because, I was in the Navy. So I must have been 18, 19, 20 years old. And it really moved me, and it really struck me. And, writing the Complex, that came back to me. And I'm like, let's examine that with this character. But Rose wasn't based on any one person. Rose was based on several trans friends that I've known over the years, and their struggles and things we would talk about. They would tell me and explain to me. A lot of people don't know this. I have a trans stepdaughter, Mary's daughter, Ada, who I've known since she was 4 years old. I've watched her grow into the woman she is today, and so I've been very aware of what she's gone through. But I've always had trans friends. Going back to high school in the 80s. Now, back then it wasn't as open. I had gay friends too back in the 80s, and you think, oh, well, that was the era of Boy George and Culture Club, and Prince putting androgyny right out there on stage, and George Michael and Elton John, and yeah, but they were not treated as well as they were until recently. And I say until recently because I don't care which side of the political spectrum you're on. I think we can all agree that over the last however many years, we have regressed as a nation when it comes to equality and human rights, particularly for folks like that. So, I don't want to say I used all of their experiences, but I know that all of that subconsciously formed Rose. Now, for the second part of your question, to getting characters like that right, pre-readers. I'm lucky enough to know enough diverse people that I can find a pre-reader for just about any character. If I'll give you a great example from the complete opposite side of the spectrum. I've got a buddy. Well, I won't say buddy. I'll say associate. He's a redneck. He's a country boy. He wears a red hat. You can guess how he voted. There's a character in With Teeth, one of the protagonists, who is that type of character. And I wanted to make sure that even though I abhor that philosophy, even though Donald Trump fills me with loathing, I wanted to make sure that this character who voted for him wasn't a caricature. They weren't just a buffoon. Okay. I wanted to give them agency just as I would anybody else. Okay. Because I'm very aware that people from all walks of life are reading my books. And I don't want to make anybody think I'm making fun of them. Okay. I mean, yeah, if you're an open fucking racist or, pedophile or serial killer, yeah, fuck you. I don't care about your feelings to my books. I never forget BTK, Dennis Rader apparently was reading my books. That still bothers me. But for the most part, I don't want to trigger people, reading my books, and I don't want to make fun of anybody for who they are. So when I finished With Teeth, I sent it to my normal pre-readers, but I also sent it to this guy, and I said, hey, you and I don't agree on anything politically. I think you're an idiot, but I'd like you to read this and tell me if it's a fair portrayal. And he thought it was. It's the same thing with Rose in the Complex. I sent it to two trans folks that I know. One was a writer and one works in the healthcare industry. And I said, let me know what you think. Be honest with me. Tell me if I fucked it up. And they thought I did a good job. So I do that with everything. I didn't used to. You go back to like The Rising, City of the Dead, Conquer Worms. I did not do that. And I think it shows. And I regret that. I wish I could go back and rewrite those. But, to do that is madness. The work has to stand for what it is. But I'm certainly more aware of it now. I guess it was around the time of, well, I remember the first one that I actually thought, I should let somebody who's experienced this go buy this. It was Ghoul. And I let a few people who were victims of childhood abuse read it. And I said, well, what do you think? Did I go too heavy here? And they approved. Dead Sea was another one. I ran it by a few friends. So the bottom line, Jay, when I first started doing book signings, and I guess that was 2001. No, 2000. No, 1999. Oh, no, it was 2000. The more signings I did, the more readers I met. And with each new book, the more readers I had. And, my readers were from all walks of life, literally all walks of life. I always wanted to make sure they were enjoying the books. These days, of course, we talk about representation, and it's a big deal, and it should be a big deal. And people think I'm joking when I say this, but if you watch the latest season of Stranger Things, Eddie, I love Eddie. That's representation for me. I was that guy. It was so great to see that. And I think as artists, I think we have to do that. As artists, we want to convey. Maybe we just want to entertain, but maybe we want to go beyond that and convey. But either way, people need to identify with your characters. And it can't just be, this character's gay. Gay people will identify with. This character's a person of color. People of color will identify with. This character is a straight white guy. Straight white guys will identify with him, because that's bullshit, okay? There has to be more to a character than their sexuality or their religion or their race, particularly in horror. Okay, in horror is only effective. It only works if the readers give a shit about what happens to the character. Okay, so you have to invest your readers in these characters. And the way to do that is to find that human commonality that we all share, regardless of who we are. We all probably know what it's like to have our hearts broken. We all probably know what it's like to feel alone. We know what a puppy smells like or a baby smells like. Those are the things you got to find. Okay. But, I absolutely believe if your protagonist is a person of color, get somebody to read that and make sure you did it right. If your character is LGBT, get somebody to read it and make sure you did it right and listen to what they have to say to you. Okay. It's that simple. Not you, Jay. I know you do that, but I'm saying other people watching the stream who want to be writers. Ken Jensen asks, you mentioned at one point you were working on a straight Western, not horror. Any updates on that? Yes. It's written down on my whiteboard up here. You can't see it. The novel is called The Last Stand. I'm not serializing it on Patreon. It's about halfway finished, but I have set it aside because I've got too much other stuff to do. Writing a straight Western is very different than writing a horror novel because there's so much research involved. Western fans know their history, and if you get one little thing wrong, they will tear you to pieces on the internet. I've seen it happen to other Western writers. I can tell you a rough plot. Basically, there is a Civil War veteran. He fought for the Union. He has very bad PTSD. Of course, back then they didn't know PTSD was a thing, but that's what he has. And he moves out west, and he wants to be left the fuck alone. So he builds himself a little cabin way, way far away from anybody. Well, then this daughter of a rich merchant and her stable boyfriend, whose marriage has been forbidden and who are now expecting a child, they run away, and her father hires these mercenaries who used to be Confederates to track them down. They're to kill the stable boy and bring the girl back. Well, our young couple ends up on our protagonist's front door, followed by the Confederate mercenaries. And then what we have is a classic siege novel. It's exactly Night of the Living Dead, except instead of zombies, it's a bunch of scumbag mercenaries. And then there's a twist, but I'm not going to tell you what the twist is. But it's not horror. It's a straight old Western. I don't know when I'll get back to it. I'm actually taking the last week of this month off, heading to my cabin down in West Virginia, where there's no internet, so that I can just get an uninterrupted work week where nobody can get a hold of me and there's nothing else going on. And I intend to use that time to bang out several things that are due. So maybe I'll get back to The Last Stand before year's end, but I'm not sure. But I am working on it. Jay asks, what do you think about guys on Twitter who advocate for pirating books? I'm working on being a better person and scrolling past them, but today I chose chaos. Yeah, Jay is, of course, referring to Kevin Christopher Jesse, an author who's a yellow belt in martial arts, and says it's okay to pirate and steal books, and went so far as to threaten to kick my children in the face. Kevin had a very bad day today. His wife showed up to defend him, and then she also had a very bad day. I have no sympathy for these people anymore. I'm 55 years old. We are in the start of another economic recession, and I'm just not going to play that bullshit. Thievery is thievery. Theft is theft. If you're going to steal from me, then I'm going to fuck your shit up, and you're going to have a bad day. Feel no guilt about what I did. So that's the end of the patron questions. Now I'm going to go to the chat. I'm going to read through the comments real quick. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Thank you. I appreciate it. Getting back to the first question, the initial question, if you set up a search on eBay, you can often find bargains. I found Robert Bloch's autobiography for $15. Great point, Ann. Thank you for pointing that out. You can occasionally luck into a rarish book at thrift stores like Goodwill. Yep, another great example. F. Paul Wilson is doing that with Borderlands. Actually, I should have mentioned Borderlands Press. They're doing a lot of reprints of stuff from the late 70s, early 80s, and 90s. And Crossroad Press as well. They're doing a lot of stuff from that era too. Elizabeth Massey and Wayne Allen Sally and folks like that. So yeah, there's places out there. Jay agrees with me. Inkstained is one of the best books on creativity ever. Yes, MJ, there are. But again, I hate answering this question because invariably I will leave someone out. And I don't mean to leave them out. It's just that I don't remember everybody. And there are so many great new writers. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to list 10. And I'm going to directly answer the question that have me excited about the future. These 10 I'm going to list. I'm not saying they're the greatest writers of their generation. I'm not saying they're the most popular writers of the generation. I'm saying these are 10 off the top of my head that get me excited. When I read a new book by them, I'm excited to see one coming out. Chandler Morrison, Candice Nola, Christopher Triana, Stephen Kozanowski, Wiley Young, Wesley Southard, Haley Piper, Cynthia Palaio, V. Castro, Eric LaRocca. Those are my 10. All right. Everybody that I didn't mention, it's not personal. I limited myself to 10. Those are Gretchen Felker Martin. So there, we're going for 11. And I've only read one thing by her, Manhunt, but my God, that if you haven't read Manhunt, she's like Jack Ketchum born again. It's so goddamn good. So check that out. Scrolling down through. No, lifetime subscribers will not change in any way. In fact, you'll get your books faster. You'll get your books a lot faster because no longer are we going to have to wait for publishers to remember to send me 30 copies. You'll get them as soon as I get them from Amazon, and Amazon's usually pretty quick about that. Once upon a time, you shared some info about a story you pitched to the William W. Johnstone estate. Is that a completely dead project, or will that story maybe see the light of day down the road? Yes. And for those of you who are patron subscribers, which is everybody watching this stream, that whole thing is on Patreon. It's under behind the scenes. And there's actually several parts to it. Yeah, that was a novel. J.F. Gonzalez and I were supposed to ghostwrite for William W. Johnstone about a decade after he was dead. It would have been the biggest payday either of us had ever seen. That's how much money those William W. Johnstone books still make. It was called Day of Terror. It was basically Die Hard in the Baltimore World Trade Center. But instead of one guy, it was a cop who leaned, definitely toward law and order, and his taxi driver, who was an anarchist hacker in his spare time, and the two of them have to save the day. That was what Jesus and I pitched. The publisher wanted a very right wing slant to it that made us both very uncomfortable. Specifically, they wanted to tie it into immigration at the time, which was a big thing at the time. And they wanted to make it a bunch of illegal Mexicans who came across the border and were doing this. And of course, Jesus is the son of an illegal Mexican. So we kind of said, nah, we're not going to fucking do that. And then they gave the job to somebody else. I don't know what happened, but we kept our pitch. No, that will never see the light of day. I wouldn't write it without Jesus. Because so much of that pitch was his, and it wouldn't feel right. So, but the pitch and the synopsis and all that is there on Patreon if you guys want to read it. Excellent. Great. I'm glad to hear that, Sean. Yeah, I agree, Jay. The horror is definitely going through, I don't even know what to call it. I don't think there's been a time like this. I think, when our generation came on the scene, I think that pales in comparison to what's happening now. And there's so many in the mainstream, like Josh Malum and Grady, Gabino, Gabino Iglesias, who should have been number 13 or number 12 on my list. Sorry, Gabino. And there's so many in the indie press. So many in the indie press that I can't even keep up anymore. Chad Lutsky is a great example. Here's a guy, Chad Lutsky and Tim Meyer. I've seen both of their names, and I've met them, I've had a couple conversations with Chad. I've gotten to know Tim a little better, but I just hadn't gotten around to reading them because, there's so much stuff. And over the last couple of years, I finally had a chance to read both of these guys, and holy shit, they're great. But that's the problem. There's so many good people coming on the scene now. How the hell do you keep up? All right. Will there be a story about internet pirates getting theirs in the future? Yeah, the story's right there in my Twitter feed. So, all right, gang. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for the good questions. Here's to your health. Here's to hanging in there through all the crazy shit that is going on in our world. I appreciate your support on Patreon. Seriously, particularly in these financial times. I really appreciate it, and I want you to know that. And we'll see you back here next week, and we'll see you on Patreon tomorrow. Peace.